Welcome. Amin, can you hear me?
Yes.
When you're not talking,
Yes.
can you please mute yourself?
Is that better?
No, just mute yourself completely when you're not talking.
How do I do that?
There's a microphone,
Yeah.
so you just press that when you're not talking, and then when you want to talk, you unmic, and then you can talk freely as much as you want. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, so, question.
Go ahead, my friend.
If I have about 11 songs in my playlist, would that be it?
No, you probably need like 500 or so.
500. So I'm like,
And if
so
you,
I need 100 songs more.
yeah, I mean, not 100 times, but what you can do is just go to Spotify, put those songs in that you like. Spotify will provide a playlist, and then just put the songs from that playlist into your playlist. Does that make sense?
So the Gemara says, listen to this. So Hashem says to Yoshua like this, when I commanded that when you came over the Jordan, you were supposed to set up the stones, right, upon which the Torah was to be written. You didn't do it immediately upon passing over the Jordan. Rather, where did you do it? 60 mil into the land. So Yoshua, you are also responsible because you violated my instructions. Did nothing. After Shiva left, Okim Rav Amor Ali. Rav called over his Amorah, and he said, "Sal V'darsh, V'darsh, Kasher Tziva Hashem es Moshe Avdo, Ki Tziva Moshe es Yoshua, V'chin Asa Yoshua, Lo Hisir Davar Mikol Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe." Remember again, here's the problem. So on one hand, Hashem is holding Moshe Rabbeinu Yoshua culpable for not following his directions. The pasuk says that Yoshua did everything that Moshe told him, and Moshe did everything that Hashem told him. It sounds like Yoshua was in complete compliance. So ultimately, again, Hashem says to Yoshua, you were partially responsible. Now, why were you partially responsible? So watch this. Hashem never commanded Klal Yisrael not to take from the spoils of Yericho. Hashem never commanded that. That was Yoshua's prohibition. Hashem says to Yoshua something amazing. Why are you prohibiting extra stuff? Right? If I want something prohibited, I'll tell you it's prohibited. If I don't need it prohibited, don't prohibit it yourself. Now, Yoshua did it because, again, he wanted a singular focus on war. That's what he wanted. Rabbi says, Yoshua, I didn't ask you to create that chayvah. I didn't ask you to go ahead and tell people they can't take the spoils. You introduced that, and because you introduced it, therefore, again, you are partially culpable for what happened with Achan. Incredible. So now an incredible note. Okay, so that's the story of Achan, and again we'll say, why do we do all this? Because it's incredible. Right? But why else do we do all of this? Because remember, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that before a person is executed, we tell him do vidui. Who is the source, the biblical source for vidui? So the Mishnah over here quotes Achan. Right? Achan confessed his sin before being executed. I'll say, by the way, who is the real makar for vidui, for confession? The real makar for vidui is Cain. Cain was the first person to go ahead and do vidui. The difference is, the reason why that's not brought up over here is because we're looking for a source of someone who did vidui before execution. So who was the first person to do vidui before execution? That was Achan. So now that we're talking about Yoshua, it was an incredible, ridiculous Yoshua story. And we saw this already in Gemara sense brachas. Yoshua was in Yericho. Vayisa in a vayar. He goes ahead and he sees, and the pasuk goes on to say, he sees Vayhine ish omed lenegdo v'charbo shalufo biyado. He sees a man standing opposite him with a withdrawn sword. So the Gemara says, what happened? Vayomer lo ki ani sar tzva Hashem atabasi. So now Yoshua doesn't know. He's like, who are you, friend or foe? So the man says, don't worry, I am a malach Hashem. I'm a malach. I'm only here to help. So Yoshua prostrates himself. Now remember, this was happening at night. So Yoshua, how were you able to prostrate yourself? After Rabbi Yochanan, you can't give a shalom aleichem to your friend that night. Why? You have to be concerned that maybe he's a shade. They're shaking him at night. So maybe Allah might again, maybe the person you see in front of you is not really a person but a shade. How do Yoshua give him shalom? So the Gemara says, Shiny Hazam the Kamrele Ani Sar Tzva Hashem Atabas. This man used the name of Hashem, and ultimately again, because he said the name of God, Yoshua knew it wasn't the shade. Maybe it's a lying shade. But in other words, maybe he's lying, right? Maybe he's just he's saying Shalom Aleichem, right? Because he's just trying to go ahead and pretend he's not a shade. So when it says, we have a tradition, Shadim do not go ahead and use the name of Shalom. I won't say, which by the way is such a profound yisod. Right? Everyone has the line they won't cross, right? There's plenty of stuff I will do, but there's always that, oh no, I would never do that, right? That anything and everything in front of that, I'm all in, right? I'll do all that stuff. We all have that line. We all have that line, which is good. Right? Everyone has to have that line they won't cross. So apparently, Shadim also have that line. For Shadim, again, Shadim don't use the name of Hashem in here. Amar Jason will say, Amalei, Amish will say, this is ridiculous. So listen to this. So the shade, so the Malach says to Yoshua, I'm here for 2 reasons. Yesterday, you neglected to offer up the daily Talmud, and tonight you're not learning Torah. What does it mean tonight you're not learning Torah? Actually, so I understand the first part. They didn't offer up the Talmud. There's a daily sacrifice. They didn't offer up to the Malach. So you have to be culpable for that. We'll say, what does it mean, sir? Yeah, by the way, so he says, the Malach says specifically, you didn't offer up the afternoon Talmud. So because you didn't offer up the afternoon Talmud, so I'm here as a result of liability for that. Furthermore, tonight, you're not learning. Look at Rashi. It's the 4 lines down, last 5 lines, on the right-hand side. Rashi's on both sides here. Rashi be talking about Torah. Even if you don't yet and you follow Master for Torah, Matmas Isik no Thomas. Zichim atem Master for Torah Balayla, Bahayol Akal Lishka Bagilgal, Shisham Hamach Hayablo Makabot say this is absolutely incredible. Get ready for this. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, like the following idea. That halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, the Malach says, I understand why during the day you were fighting battle, you didn't have time to learn. I get that. Yeah, you were doing battle. But at night, why are you not learning? At night, why? Listen, do you hear this? I understand you're fighting, you're at work during the day. I understand you're at work during the day. Right? You're fighting your battles during the day. I got it. But now you're not at work. You're not at work. There's nice say there. Right? I don't understand. What's
my last name.
It's a big family. It's a long night.
Like having the last name Kennedy.
It's beautiful when it comes to these nights in the morning. It's incredible. That is not up to her not to learn at night. I have to learn at night. Again, I do need a base measure as well because it's just a different kind of experience. So the Malach said, listen, it's wartime.
I've launched apps on the App Store and Google Play, which is allowed for financial independence.
Where is Night Seder? Where's Night Seder? What's happening over here? It's night. I understand. You learned before you went out to war. The whole day you're busy with the war. But Lamaisa, now it's nighttime. Where is your learning? Listen, this is overwhelming Gemara. Because sometimes we think we've got it all figured out. I learn in the morning, I go to work, that time is for me to relax. Just understand, again, they were pretty busy during the day over here on the Yoshua. And yet the Malach comes out of his way to say, there's no such thing at night when there is free time, not all of it, but some of that time was absolutely unequivocally devoted to the study. So I was going to have to stop over here for today. We're fine. I just want to point out, we did a lot of Gemara today. We did do a lot. Wrong block, but we did do a lot. Again, we're not going to rush. Beautiful, fine wine Gemara. To be continued tomorrow, Shkoyach. All right, and a good Chodesh. Everyone's going to have a great day. Good Chodesh, everyone.
It says, I think it's called TikToks. But I was like, I legit thought to myself when I first saw these clips, like, did Papa start a show called TikToks? You never know. He's got podcasts out there. But this one's called, some might say, the paintedest of narratives. Should have had a B right there. And then posted by Rogan and Shorty Pie. Brandon, thank you for being here, man. Appreciate your voice, man. It's pretty badass to have you sitting next to me.
All right, to side, good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's show today. Our Talmud Torah sponsor for Top Shinpei, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, Tilsim Shlach of Israel, and dedicated all of the Shurim and Drushos this year as his host for the Soros Furniture on Israel, Tilsim Shlach of Israel. We thank you very much for the generosity and how I wish you Zok and Eretz Hashem. At the field of Akash, it's time for all of Klal Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves. The Kalman family in memory of Amit Ben David Levy, Zichron L'Bracha, the brother of Itai Levy, who was killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Hanukkah. We all dropped in the merit of our
Am I into what?
Someone have an Aliyah and the family in Chama. And we sponsors of Ari Kala Richter and memory of Rabbi Richter's grandmother Sarah Bas Shin Zichron L'Bracha. We also have a merit of our Talmud Torah. The family in the family, of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the schools of all of our precious hospitals here in the America shall be called the Shalom and the Karov, and the merit of our holy soldiers here in the Shalom are successful. The whole Maaseh Yidei. Well, so with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Men's Gimel 43. We are up to 42B. Men's days on the page. A lot to do today. We're not even just pick up from the Honey Yidei, which is pretty much right smack.
What'd you say, Big Dog?
Right across from Tosos in Ne'eman. So the Gemara says, so how do we know that in general, when someone is executed, they have to be taken out of all three makros? Remember, we spoke about this idea that this kind of the setup of the way Jewish community was modeled, or I should say, the setup of Jewish community was very much modeled after the way we camped in the desert. So in the desert, there are three camps. Machane Shechina, which represented the Mishkan in the middle, Machane Leviyah, which is where the Leviim camped around, and then Machane Yisrael, which was everyone else. So for example, Yerushalayim has that same setup. So the Beis HaMikdash, that's Machane Shechina, Harabayis, Machane Leviyah, the rest of Yerushalayim, Machane Yisrael. So the idea over here that we've been working on is that when you execute someone, you have to take them out of all three machanos, all three camps. So said, you know how you know this from. Because the pasuk says, go ahead and take the makala. But also, for context purposes, it's important to understand that there are two cases of Nisat Bezdin, right? Two cases of people who were executed in the desert. There was the makalo, who was the person who cursed HaKadosh Baruch Hu in public, and then there was the Makoshish Eitzer, the person who was Mechala, violated Shabbos publicly in the desert as well. Those were the two cases of execution that we had in the desert. So the Torah says, take out the Mechala, take out the person who cursed the Kadosh Baruch Hu, take him out of the camp, and you go ahead and execute him. So the Maradash is closely to the Machlos. What does it mean? It means take him out of all three camps. Take him out of all three camps in order to go and execute him. So the Maradash is closely to the Machlos. So you say take him out of all three camps. Maybe it doesn't mean all three camps. Maybe it just means take him out of one of the camps. It says over here by the Mekalo, by the guy who cursed the Kadosh Baruch Hu, it says by the permanent striking. Now, what is the permanent striking? If you look at Rashi says a permanent striking. There are two bulls that we're referring to over here. Number one is Par Helam Davar Shal Tzibor. So this is the specific and unique offering that was made when the Sanhedrin ruled incorrectly. If the Sanhedrin ruled an incorrect ruling, there was a particular type of carbon that was brought. That's called Par Helam Davar Tzibor. Or again, you know, the Par Kohen Mashiach. This was the Par that was brought that the Kohen Gadol delivered an erroneous ruling as well. Sharing that Kohen, neither of these carbonos are consumed. Rather, I will instruct them.
Well, you market it and you say, hey, if you want to be on my playlist, you have to pay me.
Just like by these bull offerings, they are taken outside of all three camps to be burned. So the Meshach, so to over here, this lesson of Hotzi by the Makala is also outside of all three machanos. I have a husband now, and by the way,
you can have them do it if you want.
Out of all three camps. The Torah went on, the Hotzi is called Hapara, because the Machana, because the Pasuk says the Hotzi is called Hapara.
Well, that's the thing. The artist are the people who pay you. And so in order to get on your playlist, they have to pay you.
Sorry, Sifani means all three camps. How do you know? Maybe you means to take the Torah outside of
the music industry is in a good way to make money. If you want just like an online job, you can go to dataannotation.tech, and take the test, and you can make $20 an hour or more. You basically program AI, but you don't need a coding background.
outside of the machane. The Sarah also
A coding background. So you don't need a technical background. Just go to date. You don't need an education.
Outside of the machanos, so too this one is as well.
So you go to data annotation.tech and they have a read through what you do, and you basically just basically choose which two versions of an AI description is better. It helps to train AI.
By the Chumas Hadeshim, taking out of the ash. That's also unnecessary. Why? That comes to teach me a third machana. So essentially, the repetition of this phrase on Chutz Lamachana, which is unnecessary in a number of different contexts, teaches me that whatever is taken outside of the camp is taken outside of all three camps. Related from Shchuti Chutz. So why not learn it out from Shchuti Chutz? What's the cinema again? Shchuti Chutz refers to the prohibition to shecht a carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, where does this apply? This applies anywhere outside of the Beis HaMikdash, right? This is not dafka just chutz the shalosh macharos. So, for example, remember again, where am I supposed to shecht the carbon? Inside of the Beis HaMikdash, what we'll call machane shchina. Even if you check the carbon outside of one camp, in let's say Machane Levia, you also tie for that. So the Gemara says, maybe you learn out over here, then halach l'maisa, that whenever it says chutz l'machane, that's even one machane. Gemara says, learn out from Shkutei Chutz, ma'ala halach chutz l'machane achos, just like by Shkutei Chutz, you can't go ahead and offer up a carbon outside of even one camp, afkan. So it's over here. Now what's the here? The here is by the Nakalo, right? The here is the case of execution. So too by the case of execution, maybe execution just has to take place outside of what? One camp as well. So the Gemara says, you started with Haman so essentially what we feel here is as follows, just to highlight this. So we see a number of things that are done, quote unquote, outside of the camps. Right? We have, again, we know that execution is done outside of the camps. We know that the Par Ha'elam Davar Min HaTzibor and the Par Kol Mashiach are burned outside of the camps. Now, you happen to know that those two Parim, I'll be fair with you, Parim are burned outside of all three camps. That we know that, okay? We established that just before. Shkutei Chutz, the prohibition to check the carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash applies even outside of one camp. Okay, so now I have two situations where things are done outside of the camp. Shkutei Chutz, even one camp, Parim, all three camps. Now the Torah tells me by execution, the Hotzi also Ami Chutz L'machane. Take the person you're going to execute.
What's the way you can advertise your playlist?
What don't I know? How many camps? We're executing.
Put it on social.
Originally wanted to compare the execution to the parim. And therefore, just as the parim are done outside of all three camps, so too execution is done outside of all three camps as well.
You need your own platform to be able to do that. That's what Spotify does.
Compare execution to what? To Shkutei Chutz. And Shkutei Chutz is only outside of one camp. Therefore, maybe execution
go to data annotation.tech.
Outside of one camp. That's the Shiloh. So the Gemara says no. The Gemara says, go to start when we primary sauce and hardly live in it. Then it makes more sense to go ahead and compare execution to the parim. Why? Shekin Hotzei, Amikos Lamakane, Makshir Umechater. Because execution and parim share all of these similarities. First of all, there are linguistical similarities. Lashon of Hotzei applies by both. Amikos Lamakane, by both. Makshir, both are preparatory acts, and Mechater both provide atonement. So it's more sense to compare execution to the part. No, I can go ahead and learn out from Shkutei Chutz why Shekin Adam Chote B'Neshama People Makshlu of People. Because again, on the other hand, you could compare execution to Shkutei Chutz in all of these other ways. There's lashon of adam, right? Lashon of chote. Both have liability paying with life, and people both are subject to people. Goes this around. The Mishnah says no. Machshir adiflei. It is better to go ahead and learn out one preparatory app to another preparatory app. So therefore, both said the Gemara seems intent on linking execution with the parim. And just as the parim are done outside of all three machanos, so too execution is also done outside of all three machanos. Okay, incredible. He says the Gemara, Rabbi says, Rabbi takes another approach. He says, look at this. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu? In the desert, where was Moshe Rabbeinu situated? So the Gemara says, the Machane of Yudiyah. Moshe Rabbeinu lived in Machane of Yudiyah. But remember again, Moshe Rabbeinu, he didn't live in Machane of Shechina, right? Because that was the Mishkan, he lived in Mishkan. He was situated in Machane of Yudiyah. And the Torah, when speaking to Moshe, because Moshe Rabbeinu was responsible for carrying out the execution, not literally himself, but ultimately for overseeing it. Torah says to him, Moshe, take the makalo,
what's the history of what?
Take him outside of the camp. So the Gemara says,
what's the history of what?
So that means again, outside the makalo,
Wait, what?
And then there's another lashon. So it says they took the makalo outside.
How did the Americans get here?
There's another hotzah. What does that refer to? Chutz the Machane Yisrael. That means the Chutz Machane Yisrael. So
generally,
so interestingly enough, everyone is agreeing.
it depends what you want to consider an American.
That the person is being executed outside.
Initially, no one was in North America or South America generally. Then there was crossover from the Bering Strait land bridge that allowed indigenous people to set up populations in both North and South America. There was perhaps people who sailed here from the Pacific as well, though that's not really confirmed. But it is hypothesized. Then the first people first Europeans to get to North America are generally the Vikings in about 800 of the Common Era. And then major populations begin to migrate following the 1492 discovery of Hispaniola by Christopher Columbus and perhaps the Bahamas. And then major migrations of essentially English with like the Mayflower, so that populations begin to emerge on the East Coast. That's generally how it was done.
Because again, if there's stone cold, that's another barrier.
With a mixture of Spanish and French.
So therefore, again,
Portuguese some, but Portugal is more in South America.
Without any other layers, i.e. no clothing. And then we're learning from that. Then that if you go ahead and you stone him with one stone and he dies as a result of one stone, then halacha l'maisa, you yotzi. In other words, I would have thought that skila, by definition, requires multiple stones. Kamash wanted to come with one stone. Now, we haven't gotten into this. That's an interesting study. We'll see in 2 days from now that there's a process for how you administer the punishment, the onesh of skila. So we'll discuss that in the session. So it's interesting, right? When it comes to stoning, the Torah uses a singular lashon of stones and then a plural lashon of avanim, stones. So the Gemara says you need both. Why do you need both? Whereas the concept of Rahmana, Evan, if we would have just said Evan singular, Havamina, Heichadullah makes Bechada, no Nisi, actually, so I would have thought like this. Essentially, when the minister is skila, what do you have? You have like one shot. If you get it right the first time, if you kill the guy with the stone the first time, then fine. But if somehow he escapes that first stone, he's free. Therefore, the Gemara says, "Lo neisei achrisim." It's like concept like mana avanim. Therefore, the Torah says, "Avanim." What does avanim teach us? Avanim teaches us that halacha l'maisa, again, you're going to stone him. And if it takes one stone, it takes one stone. If it takes multiple stones, it takes multiple stones. Furthermore, because of Rahman Avanim, if the Torah would have just said Avanim, Havanim meikara, naisi tarti. I would have said from the beginning you have to bring 2 stones. Because the Rahmana Evan. Therefore, the Gemara comes along and says, Evan, you start with 1 stone. I baha, hi kind of ne'emar ka'amar. Now, let's say, here's the issue. So now, just by the way, just as an aside, this skilla information, this is a side point right now. Remember, let's keep focused. What are we focused on? What are we introduced to over here? That when we execute someone, we execute them where? Outside of all 3 camps. Now, interestingly enough, the way this was introduced to us is as a pasuk. Ne'emar, the Torah says, "V'hotzil samichutz l'machaneh." Now it turns out that in reality, it sounds like we're learning this out from where? From Gzeira Shava. So the Gemara says, well, which one is it? So the Gemara says, "V'ha haytana ne'emar kamar." The Tana introduces us by saying that this is learned out from a pasuk, not Gzeira Shava. So the Gemara says, Ilu lo ne'emar kamar. So the Gemara says, Ilu lo ne'emar kamar. Ilu lo ne'emar kra. Ha'isi omer Gzeira Shava. Akshav she'amar kra. Gzeira Shava lo tzarech. So most of the Gemara says, right, in reality, we learn out the fact that we execute someone outside of our return to the pasuk. But had we not had a pasuk that made that statement, then what? Then Allah and myself, we would be able to learn it out from a Gzeira Shava. Okay, let's say first wide line. The Rashi says, Moshe Echad Yosef. Where was Moshe Rabbeinu situated? So the Gemara says, as we said before, Machane Leviyah. Moshe Rabbeinu situated in Machane Leviyah. Puts the Machane Leviyah. Alex and Gemara says, I'm sorry. So remember again, so Moshe Rabbeinu is situated in Machane Leviyah. The Torah is speaking to Moshe says, take the makalo, take the cursor outside of the machana. What does that refer to? Puts the machana leviyah. So that refers to step number 1 is taking on the machana leviyah. El puts the machana. Then it says Al puts the machana a second time. What does that mean? That's puts the machana Yisrael. That refers ultimately again to taking them out of machana Yisrael. There it says the makalo. Then the pasuk says they took out the makalo la asiyah. That pasuk, that third statement means they actually did it. They carried through on it. So much as Asiyah, right, that they carried through on it, that we already said that. B'nai Yisrael, Asu, Kashet, Siv, Hashem, as Moshe. Pasuk already says, Klal Yisrael did as Moshe Rabbeinu commanded. To which Moshe says, no. Hahu, Mibayile, Chad L'Smicha, Chad L'Tchiyah. So we're going to see that pasuk is necessary for another detail. I'll show you what we're going to call smicha and dechia. So again, we'll talk about all of these items. So the Gemara says over here, essentially, the Gemara talks about the idea that when we execute someone, it's actually quite interesting. When we execute someone, before we execute them, there's a smicha. There's a laying of hands on them. Again, we'll talk about exactly what that means. And then also by Sira, what we're going to see is the process is, first you throw a person off a high roof. The goal is that they're liable to death. They should die by impact. Right? That's the goal. That's the goal. If they don't die on impact, then we bring in the stones. Right? Then we bring in the stones. So the idea over here is the Gemara says over here, there's a placing of the hands, and ultimately again, then there's a degree of pushing. Now again, we'll discuss, by the way, that it's the witnesses, interestingly enough, have the obligation of pushing. Right? Which makes a lot, let's say, understand, sometimes if you hear this, I feel like, what is this? So just understand, remember, this is against the backdrop. We've now seen the kishkas of the legal system. And we have seen how the system is absolutely stacked to prevent executions. Right? We've seen this. In other words, the ability for a court to actually be able to render a capital ruling after everything you've seen is virtually impossible. So again, we're not finished that as well. But nevertheless, there's the concept of smicha and dechia, to which the Gemara says, Rashi, so Rabbi says Rashi as follows, according to you, Kol Hani Hotzi Dechsid Parman Esrafim, my Drashtabu. So Rabbi says Rashi, you're dashing all of these Hotzi Miramachanes. What do you do with all of these Hotzis that are mentioned by the Parman Esrafim, which again is the Par Helam, David Nasibar, Par Koin Mashiach, which one says Kasha. Rashi says, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of hoties. Okay, so I'll say, what's the takeaway? Our takeaway is that when we execute someone. So first of all, introduce the two concepts. Number one, that execution was not done in Beis Din. This is very important. For two reasons that we saw yesterday, that why wasn't execution done in Beis Din? Number one, that people should not think that Beis Din is eager to execute anyone. And number two, by moving the execution space outside of Beis Din, it buys a little bit more time for the defendant should new proof for exoneration come to bear. That's number one. So I'll say, how far outside of Beis Din do we place the execution spot? So again, we've established 3 macros, right? The assumption we're working with is Beis Din always operates within the city proper. That's what we're making the assumption on. So for example, let's say using Yerushalayim as a model, where does the Sanhedrin operate? Where does the Sanhedrin operate? In the Beis HaMikdash, in Machane Shechina. So for example, you're executing outside of Machane Shechina, then again, outside of Machane Leviah, outside of Machane Yisrael. So execution is happening outside of all 3 machanos. Incredible. Fine. Says the Gemara, Echad Omed. So the Gemara shows us in today. So remember, the other thing that we saw in the Mishnah was this fascinating idea. So let's play this out, right? Reuben was accused of killing Shimon. Witnesses came along, and let's say Beis Din Paskin, that Reuben is liable for that. So remember again, they're not going to leave Reuben out to the Beis HaSkila. The Beis HaSkila is situated outside of all 3 camps. Remember what they do? They put a guy with a flag by the entranceway of Beis Din. Remember again, it's not a guy with a flag. Another guy in ocular, right, in the greatest amount of ocular distance on a horseback, right? And then what would happen if Beis Din would find some new proof flag guy would wave his flag, horse guy would gallop out to the execution, stop everything, bring the defendant back to Beis Din. Okay, so let's say, so this is great. So Pshitari, Echad Evan Sheniskaba, the Echad Eid Sheniklaba, the Echad Shayt Shenelagbo, the Echad Sulu Shenechnakbo. So let's say, so Rabbi says like this, it's clear to me that the stones used for stoning, right, the tree used for hanging, the sword used for beheading, the rope used for strangulation, Kula Mishal Sigor, right? I was going to say, this is great, by the way, right? This is such a Jewish sugya. What the sugya, what you know what the sugya is about? When you execute someone, who's paying for it? Right? Who's paying for it? In other words, look, execution costs money, right? Who is footing the bill for this? So the Gemara says, it is clear to me that when Beis Din is carrying out the execution, obviously, the mechanism of execution is paid for by communal funds, right? Because remember again, this is the community that's going ahead and executing the individual. So the stone used for execution, the tree used for hanging, the sword used for beheading, the rope or we call it the rope, used for strangulation, all these Mishal Tzibor, these people from the funds. My time, huh? You must what's the reason for this? To make you gay, it doesn't really make sense to tell a person, by the way, we're going to execute you, and you're sponsored by you, right? Today's execution of Reuben is sponsored by the Schwartz Mishpacha, right? Like the Ibli Nishmas, Reuben. You can't. I want to point out something. If you think about it, actually, yes, you can. Like, why should I pay for Reuben's execution, right? Let Reuben pay for his own execution. Reuben got himself into this mess, right? Why is this coming from communal funds? So it's interesting because if you look closely, logically, it should come from Reuben, right? If the person is executed, part of the penalty should be that you or your estate pays for your execution. So the Gemara says the reason we don't do it is, you know why? It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel that that's appropriate to ask a person or to tell a person that they should pay for their own execution. Okay, fine. So now we've established that. Listen to this. So by the Sugar Shemanitim the Sus Shiratzim Amidan Mishal Umu. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Right, so now Reuben is sentenced to die. So what happens? As Reuben is being taken out to the Beis HaSkila, so what does the Mishnah say? We have flag guy taken by the Beis Din. We have horse guy. Who's paying for those people? Flag guy is not working for free, right? And horse guy is not working for free. So who's paying them? Who's paying them? And you show you. On one hand, Kevin that's on the day, on one hand, you say, look, who are these guys really working for? What are they really working for? They're working for Ruben, right? And they're benefiting Ruben. So really, Ruben should have to pay for flag guy. Ruben should have to pay for horse guy. Right, the Gemara says. On the other hand, on the other hand, no. This really is an obligation on Beis Din, right? Because the obligation on Beis Din is to try to the best of their ability, to exonerate. So really, again, the Gemara is really asking over here, who is this benefiting? On one hand, it's benefiting Ruben. There's introducing some last minute evidence. On the other hand, it's part of the function of Beis Din, because Beis Din has an obligation to function in a way where they can exonerate. Therefore, let's say just how incredible this is. It's not.
What was that?
It's not a new reality that Jewish organizations have to fight. Right? This is not a new reality, right? Jewish organizations are fundamentally dependent on donations. So therefore, again, there's not an inexhaustible supply of money to the base, just like to any Jewish organization. So it's interesting. So to us, the question sounds almost like a little bit cute, but again, it's not just a question of economics. Who's paying for this? Who has the responsibility for this? Right? There is not an inexhaustible amount of money on the base of any Jewish organization. So who's responsible over here? So again, that's the Shiloh. So we say the Gemara says, Vasu, listen to this. This is great. Vasu, Hadam Rakiva Ravashi, Amar Krista, Hayoshi Vechareg. If someone is being executed, Mashkin also, Korat Shamavona Vakosha Yayin. So listen to this. They would give him a special glass of wine. And in this glass of wine, they would put a korat shalabon. Lavona is frankincense, which is very expensive. They would put one of the ingredients for the Torah. So they would give him this wine laced with frankincense. This wine laced with lavona. So apparently, what lavona does with wine, is good to know, is that it enhances the intoxicating qualities of wine. Right? Now, why was this done? When the person was going to be executed, we wanted them to be like, essentially, we get them like a sugar inebriated. Right? It would be interesting to see how that actually works. Can you imagine? But the nicer, so they would do, okay, I want to find out some nice things. This is actually very funny tomorrow. Let's say, the time of the Hagim brings down that when you drink together, what do we say? We say l'chaim. Why do we say l'chaim when we drink? So the time of the Hagim brings down because of this Gemara. Because when they would execute someone, they would apply them with alcohol so that their senses would be dulled and wouldn't fully realize what was happening. Tamer Hagim says, when we drink with each other, we drink with each other, it should never be construed chas v'shalom that we're dulling our senses because of something negative that is going to occur. Sometimes people drink as an escape. Life is difficult, I'm drinking as an escape. That's not why I need drinks. I never drinks to escape. I need drinks because a little bit of mashka, like nichnas yayin, that's a soul, has the ability to not dull my senses, but open my eyes to express how much I love every single person, right? And how much love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how much racham is. Just like Hamid Nagin says, when two Jews drink, they have to say, l'chaim, to life. Because drinking together is a life-affirming experience, not chas v'shalom, something done to dull the senses because something negative is going to occur. Mamish this Gemara, incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, when they would execute someone, they give them a little bit of wine laced with lavona, Kadesh Zar Daito. Remember that he shouldn't realize what's going on over here. Dylan says, Shneimar, Tinu Sheikhar, La'obei, the Yayin Lamari Nefesh. Literally, again, give Sheikhar is like an intoxicating beverage. Give Sheikhar to one who is lost, and wine to those who are bitter of soul, which I want to say just as an aside, it's interesting, we saw some white cotton. You might say, why did the Kodesh Baruch Hu create wine? Why did he create wine? For the Kol Shel Tanchumim. For the Gabav translation. Remember, let's say we learned some white cotton, that when the person will come back from the Levaya, right? The person will lose a loved one. Always the first thing you got when you came back from the Levaya, first thing is you got a big gulp, a wine big gulp, right? You got like a big glass of wine. Why?
Big Dog, when you're not talking, can you please mute your microphone?
To be able to take a little bit of the edge off of life. That's what Baruch Hu created, because sometimes again to new yain lamari nefesh. Give wine to those who are bitter of soul. Sometimes a little bit in moderation. In the case of the other, maybe a little bit more than normal to take away a little bit of the bitterness. So the idea over here is you would give a guy who's about to be executed, give him a chayim, give him a strong chayim, so that he should not be fully aware of what it is that's going on. So listen to this. In the Tanya, we learned Nashim Yikashim Yishalayim, how you must not go. This is fascinating. So who was this wine donated by? It was donated by the precious women of Yerushalayim. Isn't that incredible? So first of all, who were these Nashim Yikaros? Right, who were these precious women of Yerushalayim? They're the ones who donated the wine. It's interesting, by the way, that it's the women who donated the wine, right? Why not men who donated the wine? So, maybe men are more reticent to partner their wine. That's possibility one. But it's also the idea that women generally possess a much greater empathy than men do. So you can imagine what happened. Men see women be executed. Like what's the Chevra saying? What's the Chevra saying as women is being let out to execution? I knew it. I'm telling you, that guy, she had it coming. Right? He's better than all the empathy well. Women possess deep reservoirs of empathy. So you can see again how the Nashim Yikaros of Yerushalayim, when seeing someone who's going to be executed, again, maybe he deserves it. It's still tragic. And therefore, again, they would donate the wine. So let's look at this. The Gemara says, okay, let's not rule. Let's say no one donated the execution wine. No one did execution wine. So the Gemara says, you shall you. Right? You shall me, we pay for it. Once again, let's say capitalist economics. If there are no Nashim Yikaros, right? No one donated the execution wine, so who is paying for it? No, the truth is, that's actually a pretty easy one, because it's something that clearly comes from community funds. Why? To new, once you look at Rosh Hashanah, to new, the shape out the Oved, the Yaramah, to new is plural. So the fact that there's a plurality associated with that pasuk indicates that it comes from the tzibur. Okay, so that's fine. So that's an easy one. If we know that there's no one to donate the wine, that comes from community funds. So I will say again. So I just want to point out, the Gemara doesn't resolve it, right? So the Gemara says, I understand that the actual tools for execution that actually comes from community funds. The wine, execution wine, if there's not a donor, that comes from community funds. So the Shai Rabbi said the Gemara didn't answer is who pays for flag guy, who pays for horse guy. That the Gemara doesn't answer. The Gemara doesn't answer. Okay, so what says so listen to this. Watch this. So let's remember again, it's great because all these things coming together. Remember again, you had the Sanhedrin. Who's sitting in front of the Sanhedrin? Who's sitting there? In front of the Sanhedrin? 3 rows of students. Now remember again, we saw that in the deliberations, if one of the students says, I have an argument to exonerate, what would they do? They'd put him on the basement. Okay, so watch this. One of the interesting things here. So let's say one of the students says, yes, I have an argument to exonerate. And what happened? Then he became mute. So he said he had an argument, but he never got to advance the argument. So what is the halacha? So menafeach Rav biyadei. So Rav says interesting. Menafeach biyadei means Rav is like waved. What's the word like when you wave someone off? Dismissed, right? He like waved like in a dismissive way. So nishtatei afilu akabasofa olam nami. Come on. If somebody becomes mute and they can't advance an argument, because otherwise we should be choshesh that maybe there's someone on the other end of the world who has some type of argument on behalf of the defendant as well. In other words, if you can say it, you can say it. If you can't say it, you can't say it. Just because someone said, I have something to say, and then you lost the power of speech, we can't accept that at all. Tish Tumar says, no. It's different because to be kosher for someone who may or may not exist at the other end of the world. Okay, that's a possibility. We have no reason to think that suggests. Over here, the student literally said, "Hey, Chevra, faced in Sanhedrin, I have something to say." He stepped forward. He just never got a chance to say it. To which the verses Tashma, let's analyze. Let's listen to this. If you have one of the students who said, I have an argument to advance, to exonerate to exonerate the defendant. And what happened? And let's say he's put on the Beis Din and then he died. Because the halacha is we count his opinion even though he's dead. Right? We count his opinion even though he died. So the Gemara says, so what do you see from here? It's only if he actually advanced it. In other words, the Talmud says, I have grounds to exonerate. And we put him on the basis, and he advances his opinion. And then he died. Okay, so we can still count his opinion even after he died. So that's because he articulated it. So the Gemara says, Zicha in Lo Zicha Lo. To which the Gemara says, Zicha Pshitali. Amar Tibai Lacha. So the Gemara says, you're right. Obviously, if the student advanced his opinion and then he died, so the Chiddush is I can count his opinion even though he's dead. The Shaila says what? The Shaila is in our case, where what happens if a student stepped forward and a student said, I have grounds to exonerate, but he never quite gets around to actually saying it. Can we count that as something or not? So ultimately, again, the Gemara says, the Gemara kind of ends off with a kasha. Okay, so the Gemara begins to say, afilu, let's remember again, the next part of the Mishnah said, it's going to be a fascinating Mishnah. The next part of the Mishnah said was as follows. Ruvain, right in this case, played his fault. Ruvain is in a base Askila about to be executed.
He's a marketing king, he's a numbers guy,
Ruvain is about to be executed. Remember again, now what happens over here? Now, right, and now Ruvain says, wait, I realized I have an argument to exonerate myself. So let's say, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, so we go ahead and we bring him back even 4 or 5 times. Right? We'll keep bringing him back. So the Gemara says, now the issue the Gemara says is that with a caveat. What's the caveat? The Mishnah said last verse of the Mishnah, as long as what? As long as it appears that there's some substance to what he's saying. In other words, that halakha l'maisa, we're happy to bring him back. We really are legitimately happy to bring him back. But we have to make sure that there is some level of substance to whatever it is that he's saying. Can you imagine this? Otherwise, he's just like, I realize I have something to say. I used to get to do much yesterday, like putting your kids to bed, right? Little kids before bed. But hey, one more thing. So at a certain point, there's nothing else. We've spoken about everything. You've eaten every snack already. There's nothing else. So this is an important caveat. So in other words, if you says, oh no, I realize I have one more piece of evidence. So the Mishnah says, fine, we'll take you back as many times as you have to, but however, there has to be some level of substance associated with what it is that you're saying. So now you're asking an interesting question. Is that true? Is that true every time? In other words, let's say we're moving at the base Askila, and he said, first time he says, oh, don't kill me yet. I realize I have new evidence. I just thought of something, taking back the base thing. So do we have to investigate, a little bit investigate that claim already the first time, a second time you said that, or only like for up to time number 3, 4, or 5? So the Gemara says, that's how you learn. They also learned that if he does this the first or second time that Reuben does this, kind of just give him a pass. First or second time he says, I have new evidence, what do? We take him back. We take him back to Bezdin, and we allow him to go ahead and say whatever it is that he has to say. Sounds like it's only from time 3 and on that we need a little investigation over there at the base Haskila to make sure that he's legitimate in what he is. There's some legitimacy. From time 3 and on, in each mamish b'dvar machziruno, so in mamish b'dvar in machziruno, so if there's some legitimacy, mamish, right? If there's some depth, some legitimacy to what he's saying, fine, we'll take him back. If there's no legitimacy, we're not taking him back. You're right, a person like this, read that. So what's this? That's very interesting. So what it sounds like is like this. For the first 2 times, you kind of get like a get out of skila free card. In other words, we'll take you back. We'll take you back from the base of skila to the base din. No questions asked. You say you have new evidence? Fine. We'll take you back. From time 3 and on, if you claim that you have new evidence, we're going to need to substantiate that a little bit, right, on the spot before taking you back. So the Gemara said, no, Yadi. So I said, here's the Shaila. How do you know? In other words, it's okay. So first 2 times it doesn't matter. First 2 times, as long as Ruben says, I have new evidence, you take him back. From second time and on, how do you know if he's telling the truth? In other words, if there's some legitimacy to his words. This is very true. Rabbi, the Masuna Lizuga to Rabbanon. So interesting enough, we bring 2 Talmidei Chachamim to the base Askila. Fascinating, you know? Lo. So essentially, we bring 2 Talmidei Chachamim to the base Askila, and they say, here, what do you got? What do you got? Right? And if, after he says it, they're like, oh, okay, same good, then we'll go ahead and we'll listen to him. But otherwise, again, we're just going to execute him. So the merger of well, that's the case. If you're furnishing 2 Talmidei Chachamim to kind of vet the claim a little bit from time 3 and on, why don't you just what? Have them the 2 Talmidei Chachamim from the beginning. Have them from the beginning and have them vet the claim from time 1 and on. To which the Gemara says, Agam the boys. Lo Matzi Allah, call my say. First, it's understanding that we saw Ruben is probably a little bit nervous. Right? So in the beginning, he may not be able to fully articulate the rationale for his innocence. As such, let's say, can you imagine at the execution spot? Like, it's got to be profoundly overwhelming. Right? Ruben's about to be executed. He's like, I have no evidence. Understandably, he may be a bit flustered, a tad flustered. So therefore, again, what we do is for the first 2 times, we bring him back to base. Instead, he could compose himself a little bit. From time 3 and on already, again, this has happened a couple of times already. If you got something to say it, and the two Talmidei will be there to vet it. And kill what I say. Good. So it's like, get ready for this. These things are ridiculous. Mishnah. So we'll say, so again, now this is all progression, right? All the progression is actually quite, Mishnah is like this, and Sunnah like this are very exciting because literally, again, they're flowing just one into the other. So now, let's say it turns out that they exonerate Ruben, right? It turns out you're right. Either they exonerate him, or it's this case where they brought him back to the base Askila afterwards, and it turns out that in fact he really does not deserve to be executed. So what's halacha? So Matzur los kos pachura. So they found grounds to exonerate, and they exonerate him in love, and if not, Yotzu Lisakel. They take him out to be stoned. So the Gemara says, Ukruz Yotze Lefanav. Listen to this. There was an announcer who went out before Ruben. And what would he say? Ish Ploni ben Ploni. Yotze Lisakel al Sha'aba Plonis, right? So Ruben, the son of Yaakov, is going out to be executed because he committed the following crime. So we articulate his name, the name of his father, the crime that he committed, Uploni Eitav, and so are the witnesses who condemned him. Whoever knows some type of exonerating evidence, come forward now. So we'll say, this announcement really does 2 things. Number 1, the announcement publicly shames the offender, which is part of his kapara, part of his atonement process. The announcement also puts the general populace on warning. There is accountability for what you do. And there's always accountability for what you do. And number 3, which is really the most important over here, is it's a last-ditch effort to find someone who maybe knows information that can lead to the exoneration of Ruben. That's really the goal over here. So the Gemara says, Rabbi, it's like when Neymar beyond Ploni, so what's the Machon Ploni? So what's the Rabbi? It says, by the way, you have to add in some more information. What's other information? So and other witnesses, right? And they witnessed killing Ruben on Tuesday at 3 p.m. in Tel Aviv. Why do you put out that information? Because it was like, there may be no one who knows exonerating evidence for Ruben, but maybe there's someone who says, witnesses saw Ruben kill Shimon on Tuesday, 3 p.m. in Tel Aviv. That's interesting, because they were having shawarma with us at a gas station outside Yerushalayim, right at that same time. Right? That doesn't seem to make so much sense. So let's say, so because of that, ultimately, again, it gives us the ability gives us the ability to cross-examine. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. So the Gemara says, the crews go to the front of. So the Gemara says, and we have an announcer that goes out in front of the defendant. So the Gemara says, Lafanav ein mekaralo. So it says, this is interesting. That goes to soon, and this seems to be the piece missing from the Gemara over here. Because the way it reads is, they have an announcer now, but not beforehand. That actually says, Arbo'in Yom Kodem. Not 40 days beforehand. So actually, if you have that goes with union, you can see over here, he mentions in the footnotes. I used to be able to see this level of print. Right? He mentions over here that there's pieces of this Gemara that were taken out, pieces of this Gemara that were taken out. Okay, but it means you might just intrigued by the idea that Halacha L'Maisa, we're going ahead and putting an announcer now, but we didn't put an announcer earlier on. Okay, Amadeus, what I say, Amadeus, this is a ridiculous Gemara. I'm going to show you lazy. So Shmuel says as follows: so a literally translated. If you go, sorry.
Sold 550 flip-flops and it's clear. That's why I drove here to BMW. Got a car to drive.
I don't know. You have more lines?
You haven't sold a flip-flop in 2 weeks. You're done.
Got it. Okay. Good. We're just using a regular Gemara. All right. So I'm going to show you Levi. Let me go on base. 43B. 43B. We do not have the luxury of adding in more Gemara, okay? I can't get through the stipulated amount, so give me more. I'm going to show you Levi. Whoever goes ahead and literally sacrifices his Yitzhar, right? And does the exactly. Treats as if he has honored in 2 worlds. Now, this is actually a really dramatically beautiful Gemara. Take a look at Rashi. So Rashi says, if the Yitzhar entices me to sin, the Hargo is Shabbat Shuvah. So what's this? Now, the way Rashi understands it says as follows. So my Yitzhar enticed me to sin. After my Yitzhar entices me to sin, I sacrifice, which means I subdue it, and ultimately again I decimate it, and I do tshuva,